There, there it is. Bam.
This is Jack Stewart, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. Years ago, we were supposed to do this. Yours and my buddies, Andrews and Wilson. You got to get Jack Stewart on the show. And I think we started the conversation. But like so many things in life, especially in this show life, is you got, oh, I meant to do that 4 years ago. Now I'm
Yeah.
just realizing we never got to it.
Time just gets away from you sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first off, congratulations. What a big deal to move over, and I'm gonna hold the book up here, everybody. This is the
Yeah.
latest W.E.B. Griffin novel, and look whose name is right there, Jack Stewart. Man, because when we first were started talking, I mean, you were established, right? But you were still, I don't know, were you fledgling? What would you call that? Like, I guess the thing I want to ask you first is congratulations on W.E.B. Griffin.
Thank you.
When did you know you could make a living at this?
I still don't.
Okay.
That's the honest answer. I mean, I think like any creative, right? I mean, it's we suffer from imposter syndrome, and every day I'm trying to prove myself worthy. But knock on wood, so far, I mean, I think people have been receiving my books pretty well, and I'm this was a huge honor to be able to write for Griffin, and I just couldn't be happier to be a part of the legacy.
Yeah, yeah. That whole proving up thing, though, that's our world, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're a high end. You can be in the so just for the audience. You can be a high end performer in the military at a lot of things. Some jobs are high end, and you have to rise to the job. And I'm a spy, pilot, Green Berets, whatever. You're always trying to prove up to the level of your peers because the standard is just so high. You can be great at doing logistics, but that's a different kind of prove up. And maybe they probably have the same thing, but I don't know. That's a thing. Like we're trying to figure out, like, am I meeting the standard? How do I excel? How do I out alpha these alphas in this
yeah,
case?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's in flying. It's I'm supremely confident in my own abilities, and I know that I can go get in a jet, and I can be good, but then I'll fly with somebody that I'm like, I am not good as good as him, and I do that now as a writer. Like I'll read other people's books and I was like, man, like I am terrible,
Yeah.
so I mean, comparison is probably the worst thing that we can do in any job, whatever it is, whether it's flying, whether it's writing, whether it's, anything else.
Right.
But it's natural. We're going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then there's the other thing too is when you gather in these circles of people who've already alphaed themselves into the position of becoming a jet fighter or spy or whatever it is, we've already got resumes. And when you're younger, you're trying to give your resume all the time, saying, I belong here, I belong here. And everyone else is like, the older guys are like, we know, like
Yeah.
you wouldn't be here if you didn't belong here.
Yeah.
How do you elevate your game again? And so, sure, this guy writes better than you do, but then when someone else looks, they're like, yeah, you guys all write awesome.
Yeah.
And you realize you're in this, and you can have these mind-blowing conversations where someone's like, no, you taught me this, and you're like, I taught you something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely true. And I do it all the time when I sit down with authors that I'm friends with that, I look up to. And, um, I try to remind myself that, comparison is a thief of happiness. And,
Yeah,
I'm not them. I am not trying to be, Mark Graney. I'm not trying to be Andrews and Wilson. I'm trying to be Jack Stewart. And so, I think that's the key. And that's something that, especially veterans who are transitioning from the military into civilian world, that's something they have to struggle with, is their identity, because for so
yeah,
long their identity was wrapped up in the uniform and what their job was, and then they kind of have to find themselves on the outside. So it's not. I don't think I'm the only one that's had to deal with this or is dealing with it. I think it's pretty common.
when you go to a party, what do you say you do for a living?
I say I'm a pilot.
See,
Yeah,
see,
yeah, yeah. I say I'm a pilot. I mean, it's been my whole life. It's hard not to
right.
be identify as that. But then later it comes out. Oh, and also I write books on the side, and eventually that's what I would like to do is introduce myself as an author and transition to that being my full time thing. But I'm still years away from making that happen.
Are you? Is that true? I don't think that's true.
I mean, I think Yeah, I mean, I think I could do it, I think, but just for, personal reasons, family reasons, I think, I'm gonna stick out the flying for a little while longer.
Well, I'm not saying don't fly, but I'm saying you should, not could, you should say, "Oh, I'm an author," because whatever you've done in the jet fighting, piloting world, you're writing, Web Griffin.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
plus your own stuff, which got you
yeah.
the right. So if you're talking about pyramids, that's a harder pyramid to climb. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And like I said before, I'm super honored to contribute to the legacy just because, before I started writing books, I was a fan. I was a reader. I remember going, before we go on a road trip as a family, my parents would take me to the store and I could pick out a book, and I always picked the biggest, thickest book I could find because to me that was more enjoyment.
Yeah,
And so, inevitably I gravitated towards, Griffin and Clancy and some of the bigger names of military thrillers back in the day, and so I was a fan before I even had the opportunity to write in the worlds that they created.
yeah, it's fun. And one of the things, so here's another fun thing, and maybe someone has said this to you, but if not, I'm about to say something to you that also that I like about this. So I get to interview the guys that write for Ludlum, for Griffin, for Clancy, and then I get to potentially influence them. And look, I was a really badass counterintelligence agent, and so like I would tell our buddies Andrews and Wilson, I'm like, please don't make cliche. I'm a nerd. I can't do a push up. I need a laptop, and they don't do
Yeah,
this, but um, I have the ability, I believe, to like improve all of your all's ability to write about intelligence kind of people and everything because I have this ridiculous show now. Like, am I directly influencing you or anything? No, probably not. But those conversations that
yeah,
influence you that you gather are out there.
yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, every conversation, every interaction I have with
Right.
anybody, it doesn't matter, whether it be the person cutting my hair or
Yeah.
the Uber driver. It doesn't matter. uh those interactions really influence my writing.
Yeah. 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 I told Jack, this is the kind of asshole I love Jack Carr's books, by the way, everybody. Buy Jack Carr's books after you buy Jack's because Jack Stewart is here today. But I was talking to Jack Carr and I'm like, you are name checking Kershaw Knives, Joe Rogan show in your book. Hey, how about help a guy out?
Yeah.
Like Joe doesn't need any help here. Like, let's pass that stuff around. But it is, and actually, believe it or not, the Break It Down show has been mentioned in a show before. My friend Kat Connor,
Nice.
she mentioned the show. So these things do, real life does impact things, and
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
it's a fun world to play in that you get to play in, but actually write it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was one of the things when I had the opportunity to write this book. um a couple of years ago, I was invited to a fundraising gala for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. So
Yep.
Brad Taylor is an ambassador, and they were having an event in Dallas, and he invited me to come. And so I went, and I was just blown away by the good things that they're doing. And I was like, I need to do something to help raise money for this. So
Yeah.
um, lo and behold, this opportunity drops in my lap to write for Griffin, and I realized that this foundation is one of the charities that he has donated to, and and his son continues to donate to. And so I was like, this is perfect. I'm going to do something special. So I decided I was going to create this, custom gun case. And it was going to model it after exactly what the main character uses in the book. And so you talk about name dropping, and I do a little bit of that in this book, and I do this for specific reasons. I did read a review that somebody said, okay, yeah, we got it. It's a critical mechanics watch, but but those guys, it's a small watch company and started by two Marine Raiders, and they
Right.
only sell these watches to people who graduated from buds or from special forces training, whatever. So they're selling to operators, and they were kind enough to donate a custom watch that had the main character's nickname on the back, engraved on the back. And I was like, okay,
Right.
I'm going to throw their name out there, and I'm going to give them some publicity because it's all tied up in this one thing that we're doing, which is raising money for a great cause. So I took a little page out of Jack Carr's playbook, but for a little bit different reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And no one's knocking Jack Carr around here. I gave him the business because it's fun to do, but also true. Like, hey, that's nice. Kershaw, nice, good job. And Joe Rogan, nice. But how about a break it down show? So the other thing I was going to ask you about was when you write this, you're sacrificing some professional capacity to write for web, and it's obviously great. But how do you manage that with your own muse that you have to satisfy for your own franchise?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about it put in those terms before. I mean, I don't look at it as sacrificing because it's a different world. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, so Griffin created this whole universe for the presidential agent, all these characters, and then Andrews and
Right.
Wilson came along and they wrote book 9 and they added some more characters to it, and so that's one sandbox that I can go play in. I can play with all the toys that they created. I can even bring my own toys with me. But when I do my own stuff, I mean, that's a separate universe. It's a separate
Mhm.
world, a separate, group of toys to play with, So like, I mean, I was a kid, like, probably most boys loved playing with GI Joes and sometimes you play with Cobra and sometimes you play with GI Joe and sometimes you play
Yeah.
with both. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And that's kind of how I view it. So, um, it does help me professionally to be associated with the legacy. So there's no doubt that's a benefit, but more for me as a writer, it was just really cool that I got to, take these toys that I've been looking at for years and I finally get to play with them. So
Yeah.
that was pretty cool.
When you get that call and the relationship starts between the Griffin franchise and you, I mean, it's already great you get to do this for a living and write these books, even if you don't believe it. But what's that like when that call happened? Because if you were to tell me, who was I talking to? One of these authors I was talking to, I can't remember which one it was, but like if you would have told like Pete, like, hey, in about 25 years, you'll be writing Tom Clancy. And I don't write Tom Clancy, everybody, but if you would have, like, there's no way that's true because that even wasn't really even a thing. People wrote for Louis L'Amour back then, but
Right.
it's so big, and there's such a boom, and you get to be part of this.
Yeah.
Would you have believed it if you told yourself 10 years ago?
No, no, 10 years ago, no. 3 years ago, no. I mean, my first book was published, a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah,
And I mean, at that point I started going, "Oh, maybe this is actual possibility down the road." But it was still, it was about as nebulous as actually writing a book, like when I first
right.
sat down to write a book, it was like this big monumental feat, I didn't think it was possible. And then I finished it and I was like, "Oh, okay, it is possible to write a book. And let me write a second one." Oh, okay. And so gradually it's
This is
gaining
easy.
steam and, I wouldn't say it's easy, but, it was definitely within the realm of
Yeah.
possibility. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is possible. Now, I will say with Griffin, it wasn't even on my radar because, Andrews and Wilson wrote Rogue Asset, which was
Yep.
book 9, and that was in 2021, I think. And so there'd been a long gap, and I didn't think that they were going to continue the series, and so it wasn't even on my radar. And in fact, just based on how my contracts all lined up, I had to write six books. What is it, right? Seven. I'd write 7 books in basically 2 years, but
Oh,
the book number 7, I had a whole year to do, and so I was just jamming through, and this would have been last like June. And
uh-huh.
I turned in book number 6. I was like, okay, I could take a break. I can like take a whole year to write this last book. And then my agent called and said, "Hey, would you like to write for the Presidential Agent series by W.E.B. Griffin? And by the way, they'll need that
Oh,
in like 5 months." I was like,
yeah.
okay, so my year of relaxation just kind of went out the window, but it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Of course. Yeah.
And I really didn't have time to just sit back and think, wow, this is great. I had to get to work. I had to do a lot of research and do a lot of
Yeah.
reading and get cranking on it. But I'm so happy I did.
What's a lot of reading? What's that sound like? What's that look like in terms of a pile of work?
Well, so I mean, I was a big Griffin fan, but I hadn't read this series other than the Andrews and Wilson book. I read the Brotherhood of War series. I read the Core
Hmm.
series, and just I guess when these books came out, I was busy in the military and op tempo was high, and so I don't think I was reading as much then. But so when I got this opportunity, I said, okay, let me I'm going to be methodical about it because, I know that the Griffin name means so much to so many people, including myself. And so I wanted to do it just back. And I looked at the reviews from Andrews and Wilson's book. I wanted to see what they did right and what fans of the series didn't like. And one of the things that I determined is that they did not include a lot of the legacy characters. They basically included a couple of the main characters, Charley Castillo being one, and then they fast forwarded the series like, I don't remember, 15 years or something like that, and they advanced it that much. And it was kind of a complete reboot. And a lot of the fans wanted to know what happened to some of these older characters. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way that I can bring these old characters back. And because that's what makes a Griffin book, a Griffin series, uniquely his, is that these characters all have connections and they all carry through the series and they weave in and out of the story at different times. And so I went back and I read all 9 of the original books, including the Andrews and Wilson one. And I wanted to figure out, okay, which characters am I going to pull forward? Which questions need to be answered? For instance, why was Sweaty, who was Charley Castillo's pregnant wife, the last time you see her, why was she not in book 9? What happened to Max, who was a dog that, he'd had by his side through most of the series. And so I wanted to bring I wanted to answer a lot of those questions. And so, yeah, that was the reading I did.
Yeah. And again, I know that you're not an author for a living, but if you're sitting down and reading 9 books and then trying to brainstorm out the book, how's that process? Are you doing it as you're reading? Are you taking notes and like building, or do you read it all, let it sit? How do you do that?
Well, so I actually came up with a story idea before I
Mm,
did all my reading. And so the story idea I came up with was based, I guess, thematically a little bit on the first book in the series. So the first book in the series is By Order of the President, and what that book is really good. It introduces Charley Castillo as the main character. It
okay.
introduces him as the presidential agent, and in doing so, there's a lot of flashbacks to when he was younger, to when he was a boy, to when he was at West Point, to when he was an early helicopter pilot, and in the Army. It flashes back to all those things, which feed into his overall character. And so I wanted to do that with Pick McCoy, who was the new presidential agent that Andrews and Wilson created. That he was going to be the understudy. And I think in Rogue Asset, they knew that Pick was going to be the presidential agent at some point, but he wasn't there yet. And so what I wanted to do with this book is I wanted to thrust him into that moment right from the beginning. So no question, you no longer have like a safety net. You're the guy. So that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to tell a little bit of his backstory, but I didn't want it just to do with meaningless flashbacks. I wanted those flashbacks to actually advance the story. And so I created this loose idea. And then I started filling in a lot of the holes as I read these books. And so I'd read them and I'd take notes. I'm like, okay, this is a way that Griffin described this, or this is how, this character refers to this character, and I just make these little notes that I would weave into the story to really
Nice.
hopefully
Yeah.
capture his voice.
Yeah. How happy are you with your ability to capture his voice? Like, I guess, how hard was it to capture? And then how close to the mark did you get it for you?
I mean, it's impossible to write just like him. I mean, he was a
Yeah.
genius, and
Right.
anybody who's a fan of his books knows that. But what I hope to do was that people will read my book and will go, he does a pretty good job of honoring that
Yeah.
tradition, honoring that legacy. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not trying to create a facsimile. I'm not really trying to mimic his voice so much as I am trying to pay homage to it.
When I was younger, I used to read a lot of the Clancy books, and there reached a point where Clancy could no longer speak to me. It's like mid '90s. He had kind of, for me, aged out. Now I'm
Yeah.
in the military. I'm actually doing the job, and I'm like, I don't. These characters he's writing, he's aged, and he's taken his age with him. Now I'm not being too critical of Clancy here, but I think it's been a huge benefit to the Clancy franchise, especially Andrews and Wilson, but
Mhm.
all of the guys who write under all the banners. I've had Jerome Preisler on the show, all these different guys. They do such a great job. I don't even know, like, the voice is important, and I think you guys are all great at doing that. But I think you guys also get to keep it at the right age,
Yeah.
and do what you can there. It's real remarkable. And it's hard to keep track of. It was MP Woodward or whoever I talked with about these things, but it's the responsibility to get it right, but also
Mhm.
to get it right. And there's two different versions of right, and they overlap.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I know we're here talking about the Griffin, but I,
Yeah.
recently was picked right for Jack Ryan Jr. series,
Oh, you
published by
were?
Mike Woodward. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
so I just turned in that book. And so, I have the same as Andrews and Wilson, I have the unique, ability to compare, writing from one franchise
Yeah.
to the next, right?
Yeah.
And I look at like what makes each franchise, successful. And for me, like Griffin, it was the character relationships. That is the number
Mm,
one thing in all his
okay.
books and all his series that really stick out to me as a reader, as a fan, right? Clancy, early Clancy was very, techno,
Hmm.
it was very techno driven. I mean, every the details of how a missile was made or how a missile was employed or how a nuclear reactor is made. That was the stuff that made early Clancy really
Yeah.
good. But there were some other elements too, which we're able to see continue through as these new authors come in. And that's, maybe like an underdog like Jack Ryan, who's not supposed to be out there, kicking indoors, finding himself in situations. So I look at that element of story and how other authors who have continued the franchise, how they have employed that. And I think that's, for me, that's what I like about Clancy, and it's something completely different for what I like about Griffin. They're two unique legacy series, and I'm really excited about working on both of them.
I'm excited for you, man. I mean, let's make sure we clear the air here, everybody. We are talking about the Griffin book, Direct Action, with my man right there, Jack Stewart. And the link is boop, right down below me. This is what you guys know what I always say about this. Buddy read. Buy two, buy one for a friend. You're going to love these things. These guys are all great at this. And Jack is just the latest guy. As I read through this book, look, I'm not a Griffin guy. Like, I haven't read a lot of these books. I can't keep up with all of these books. But as I read it, man, you had me going, and I was super pleased. I'm pretty damn picky, right? Because I read a lot of books, and it's not that someone's style doesn't work or isn't any
Hmm.
good. Like, just, I have a thing that I like, and if the person is overly, his green LL Bean jacket with his, and
Yeah,
that's too much. Takes me out of the story, right? If it's too descriptive. But you stuck it for me. I kept forgetting that you wrote this book. I'd pick it up, I'd start reading, and then I'd be like, wait, who's writing this thing? Oh, it's Jack, right, Jack Stewart. So that's a compliment, because if I'm not thinking about you and I'm just in the story, that's where I want to be. I don't want to
absolutely.
think about, oh, this is, and in my head, I'm like, did we, and I was remembering, did we do a show? Did we not do a
Yeah,
show? Anyhow, so there's a
yeah,
lot for me to be distracted by. And also, because I've become to know a lot of you guys, MP Woodward, we just talked about, um, it's, it's easy for me to lose track of the fact that there's a story going on, and it's not some person that's writing it. So that's a credit to your writing. I love it. Everybody,
thank you.
again, here it is again, right here. W.E.B. Griffin, Direct Action. All right. So this genre has exploded in general. Do you have any idea why? Why is it gotten so big now?
It's funny that you say that, because I think as authors, we're kind of finding it different.
Okay.
And when I say that, I think there are a lot of people like you or I who enjoy reading these books. And what we're finding is a lot of publishers are not acquiring these books. And so
Mm,
I think what you're finding is that maybe a lot of this genre, other than the big established names, I mean, other than that, people are probably self-publishing or smaller publishing houses, and because there's a demand for it. And I think the simple answer, is that our country's been at war for you know several decades now. I mean, we have a
right.
whole generation of people who've known only war, and it tends to be, that's why you find a lot of these books are centric to the Middle East and
Yeah.
conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, and terrorists. And I mean, just look at the tragics, what happened in Australia,
Yeah.
just yesterday. I mean, this this is the kind of thing that when you go to the beach with your family, that you I think most people don't think about it, but then you have people like me and other thrill authors that are worried about
Yeah.
stuff like that happening, and it's happening on the headlines. And so it just gives a lot of material for people. I'm an airline pilot. I'm always walking through the airport thinking about what could happen when I'm on an
Yeah.
airplane and what could
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And so it's just in the forefront of our mind and our consciousness.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, this is this is right up the alley for guys like us. So I write as a hobby. I don't think I'll ever write. Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll write a memoir. But who knows? For right now, I'm a hobbyist, and I like to just describe situations. And so I'm always writing a book as I walk around, because again, I'm a counterintelligence agent. I know how to run operations, and I understand terrorism. And so I look around and I'm like, how would I blow this building up? How would I kill 100 people right here? And so I'm
Yeah.
I'm just always doing that. And where would it cause the most emotional damage? And this is
Hmm.
terrifying for people to think about, but also that's also how you counteract these things, is by
Absolutely.
understanding
Yeah.
what's juicy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
it's,
so
I mean,
attacking the beach, oh my God. Yeah, go ahead.
I was, for many years in the Navy, I was an adversary pilot. So I was trained in threat tactics, threat aircraft, threat missiles.
Yeah,
And so, I put myself in the mind of the enemy so that I could better train
yeah,
our fighters.
sure. Yeah,
And so that's just the mindset that you kind of have to do when you enter into writing a book like this, is like, what is the enemy going to do? How are they, just like you're saying, and that's what makes it realistic. That's what makes it terrifying sometimes, prescient at other times.
yeah. It's funny. I was in court one time, and because of COVID restrictions, you had to walk a certain way. And if you go to a court building, like, you just like, I don't hang out around here, you get lost. So without doing anything wrong, I ended up behind security because of the way, like, I got on and someone else got on, and all of a sudden they were going up. I'm like, oh, I was trying to go down. And then all of a sudden, boop, I'm right by the courtrooms. And I'm like, oh my God, I just infiltrated the court. Now
Yeah.
I've got to decide, first off, I got to go walk over to that sheriff and announce that, hey, I have accidentally ended up
Yeah.
here. But I thought, man, it's that easy. It's that easy to
Yeah.
infiltrate. And if you figure out that system, and even if you don't bribe anybody, you can just end up behind lines. I instantly, as I sat there in court, wrote a whole story in my head about, you know, that one instance, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were talking earlier about the my perception of the explosion of the military thriller genre. It's done so well from my point of view, and then you're like, hey, hold on, not so fast. But how did you? I guess the fair question is you've only written a couple of these novels at some point, and then they call you, right? But you've got tons of reviews and everything
Mhm.
else. There's a lot of people that don't even have that level of success. What do you attribute that success, all the reviews, the phone calls from your agent, to have an agent, to have an agent? Oh my God, right? How did you do that?
Yeah. I mean, that's the $1 million question. I know that's the one I was asking, before I had an agent. Like, how do you break in? Like, how do you break in the business? And for me, I know, I approached it just like I approached everything else in my life. I said, that's my goal. What do I need to do? And I dissected it. Okay, so I need to write a book. I need to make sure it's something that can sell. I need to find an agent. And I did the typical sending out query letters with manuscripts, and got a bunch of rejections, got a bunch of silence, and I heard from numerous people, you got to go to conferences, and so I started going to conferences. Meanwhile, I'm networking, and I'm building my network online with other authors. And so when I show up at my first conference, I am now meeting people for the first time that I've been interacting with for a while. And they were gracious enough to take me in and introduce me to other people, and it just slowly built. It's um having been to those conferences now on both sides, I can say that it's you can smell desperation a lot of times.
Mm,
And so when I went to my first conference, the first thing I wanted to do was, okay, I'm not here for any objective other than to learn and interact with people that I consider to be, kind of my heroes, my idols,
yeah,
right? Like, I just wanted to interact with them. That's it. I didn't want I didn't want to like bug anybody about, hey, will you introduce me to your agent? Hey, will you read my manuscript? Hey, will you do this? Will you do that? I just wanted to be there and enjoy the experience. And I think that matters. I think I've been now as a published author, when I go and sometimes people will latch on to me, or they'll walk by and they'll look at your name tag and they'll see whether or not you're somebody that's worthy of talking to. And it's kind of funny to kind of watch that interaction. So, my advice to people is, if this is what you want to do, put yourself out there and just meet people and just support other authors. You go to book signings and spend a few minutes with them, afterwards, talking with them about the book. Take a picture, post it on social media, support them, because if that comes across as genuine, and if you genuinely support them, they will genuinely support you. And that's what it takes in any business, right? Networking is number one. So that's just what I did. And it worked out for me. It doesn't work out for everyone. But it's a tough business.
Well, and the biggest lift of all is getting the book written and having it be professional and doing that. I mean, you can meet all the people you want. I mean, I've met a lot of people. I've not put 100,000 words on a page and published it, so there is that part of it, right? And that really is all you. You are the ones that has to go to the conferences. And for whatever reason, I was doing a show with Andrews and Wilson. This is several years ago, and Jeff was the one that said, "Hey, have you had Jack Stewart on the show yet?" Right? And again, like back then, you're just getting started, and you got him on his own without just to say, "Hey, you got to have Jack on the show." Right. And of course I want to have Jack on the show. I failed at that, but here we are now.
Or I failed at it.
Well, yeah, how about we fail? We failed together. Here we are doing it, unfailing ourselves. So, but that kind of thing is possible if you put the work in, and the work that you do is good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff's great. Brian is also a great guy.
Yeah.
Both of them have been, hugely supportive of me, and I consider them to be, they're my big brothers in the business, my mentors. And I'm always calling and asking for advice, and not just on the business side of things, but also in the writing side of things, or just the life side of things. I mean, they're guys that I value their opinion.
Right.
And yeah, that matters. But I think if I, didn't have a book, if I wasn't putting in the effort to actually write a book, that they wouldn't have any, they wouldn't be pushing me to come on your show. Right. I mean, there's really, they need to have something to support. And so that's the thing I tell everyone, like, first and foremost, like, you gotta have a book. You gotta have a book that's going to sell. And that there's different between a good book and a book that sells. Right. And that's, I tell people all the time, because sometimes somebody will write a book it's fantastic, but it won't sell for this reason, that reason, or whatever. Right. So you have to decide what you're going to do. If you're going to be a commercial author, you're going to be somebody that wants to actually sell books, then you kind of have to look at those elements and adjust it accordingly. But yeah, it's a great community. Made some really good friends, and we're all supportive of one another. And it's awesome.
Yeah, but you're right. There's always, whatever kind of art it is that you're doing, you have to balance pop versus art. And I don't need an 800-page opus.
Right.
on
Exactly.
on military thrilling or whatever it is. Yeah. And so there is, unless that's what you do, right? And you write these big long things, and that's a different path. And it's certainly a path, but none of them are easy. And just getting the book published and agent, like all that stuff, again, is well above the bar for greatness.
Yeah. It definitely is a hard path, but I think just stay true to yourself, and and eventually it's going to work out the way it's supposed to.
The way it's supposed to, right? In its time too, right? Like us military guys often think that we can't. I think we'll use my show as an example. You can't outwork the problems in this world, So I can publish all the shows I want, I can meet all the people, but it's on me to figure out where the value is in my show. And my show has been big at times; it's kind of waned and waxed and everything else. But the main thing is I can reliably do it, and I have opportunities all the time that come out of it. It's on me to realize and increase that value, whatever that is. And so, is it eyeballs? Is it people calling me on the phone to help them with a thing? Okay, great. But that's what I've created, is a machine that's bigger than me and creates opportunities and networks.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I say, like, comparison is the thief of happiness, or the thief of joy, because
Yeah.
Like it's easy to look at somebody who's a debut author that gets, really, really nice advance from a big publisher, and you're like, man, how'd they get so lucky? You know?
Yeah.
And I know Don Bentley says it all the time. There's a few other people that do too, but like, almost a overnight, success if you count the 10 books written before,
Right.
like
Sure.
that's what people don't see. People don't see the effort that goes in before you get your,
Yeah.
first contract. And so I just, my wife has to remind me all the time, like, hey, there are people who'd kill to be in your shoes. So
Right.
anytime I look at somebody else, like, why can't I be like more like them? Why can't I have the sales that they have? Why can't I have that many social media followers? She's like, there are people who would kill to be in your shoes. Just remember that. So that's again, from a military person, that's hard for me to just appreciate where I am and not be thinking
Hmm.
about over the horizon. What's the next objective? What's the next target? But I do need to stop and think like, okay, I'm so blessed to be where I am, very happy to be where I am, and I need to enjoy
Right.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And realize the value in that space. Boy, that it's such a, you know, we all do this, right? And so when you say it, you're saying it to me, but I know you're saying it for you. But
Yeah.
it's so true. I worked my heart out building this show, and I mean 2,000 plus episodes. I don't even count really anymore. I just say 2,000. It's like, oh shit. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of times when I'm like, it's not good enough. I'm not good enough. There's not enough people watching it. And then the phone rings or a check shows up for something I didn't even know I did. Like, hey,
Right.
you helped us out. The next time someone says, let's send Pete a check for $500 because he helped us make this thing happen. And I didn't even know I did anything. And I'm like, oh, so like I get down on it, but I also try to look around and go, man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But so at my best, I realize that. At my worst, I think, it's not good buys, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, back to the book. When you're set up for this, do you know how long you're gonna do this for, or like what the current contract is? What can we expect?
Yes, it was a one book contract. And Tom Colgan's the editor
Hmm.
of that series. He's the editor of the Clancy series as well. And so, I knew it was going to be a one book. I think they were kind of waiting to see how well it's received before they do
Hmm.
another one. I would be thrilled to write more in this series if
Sure.
I'm given the opportunity. And I think that, if it ends up being successful and to where, Putnam wants to continue with the series, I definitely want my name to be considered. And I hope I get that opportunity, but at this point it's a business decision.
Yeah.
But the biggest compliment I can say that I have is, I received an email the other day from W.E.B Griffin's son,
Oh,
William Butterworth the fourth, and he told me that he was really pleased with it. And so, hey, I mean, if I can, if that's the only review I get for this book, then I'm thrilled.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really, again, what a wonderful thing, right? I
yeah,
mean, this is, there are no more Webb Griffin the third books coming out from the man himself. Yeah, it's not possible. So yeah, I mean, I would love to hear that. Maybe it makes it worth every bit of it worth it.
oh,
That's great.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Man, that's great. I love that. I know I'm just excited for you and everything else. So I had some pretty good news too in the story world from some of my work, and the first guys I let know, I swear to God, this is true, that outside of like my community where I'm kind of keeping it tight was I got a hold of Anderson Wilson, and I'm like, hey, just a little bit of news, but I've had this pretty major break fall into my lap. We'll see where it ends up, but it's a very big thing. And those guys are like, the second you're ready to have a bigger conversation, let's have it, because they
that's
have their
awesome.
own imprint now, right?
Yeah,
Like they've gone up another level, and that's crazy. And so it is so great, like to be, and I'm putting myself in your guys's group of people because you know, we're all doing this. MP Woodward, we're all doing this at the same time. I'm doing my part to support you guys, but it's really fun to see this version of our salon that we're all working in, and we're creating these bigger things and growing. It's remarkable to experience that with you all.
yeah, yeah, it is. And you mentioned the Anderson Wilson imprint. I mean, that's a really exciting opportunity, and I think what our genre needs right now. I
Hmm.
think the bigger publishing houses kind of lost their way on how they're going to market these kinds of books and how they're
Mhm.
going to make them successful, because people aren't doing book talk about, Griffin books, or, they're not promoting them the same way. And so what Andrews and Wilson are doing with this imprint is a pretty exciting opportunity. And I joke that, they stepped down from writing the Clancy books, and by them doing that, I ended up with 2 contracts, because I ended up, taking over the Jack Ryan Jr. series, and I got a book contract with the Andrews and Wilson imprint. So it's exciting. I'm happy to be a part of it, and those are some great guys, and the things they're doing in the storytelling world is it's awesome.
I didn't realize you were on their imprint. I didn't, because they just said they had it. They hadn't said who
Yeah,
was on the roster. Oh,
yeah,
can you talk about that yet at all or no?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, they
Okay.
they Blackstone put out a press release, and they mentioned me, and Josh Hood. I think Don Bentley was the other one that they've got. And they're looking at other people too. They want to have some debut authors, but also some established guys. And but the story that I'm writing, I'm in the middle of writing it right now for them.
Oh,
It's I'll just say it like this: it's like Space Cowboys meets Top Gun Maverick.
nice.
So the premise is that, our advanced fighters have all been grounded due to a malware and a cyber attack, and so they have to go to the boneyard at Davis Monthan Air Force Base and pull a
Oh,
bunch of old Cold War fighters out. But the problem is that nobody knows how to fly them, and so they get a bunch of old has-beens like me, airline
yeah.
pilots that used to fly these cool things, to help teach the younger generation. And so it's a really fun story to write, and I'm really looking forward to that one, because that again is going to be like, my own name on a book. So I'll be
Uh,
excited for that.
I went to Davis Monthan one year. This is back in the '90s, and I was too young to appreciate, even though I was in my 20s, and they had a bunch of World War II guys there, and they were talking about their bombers, and it was just an incredible operation, that they put together. And the one of the guys I talked to just started crying. He was so moved by this being recognized in this thing. I wish I had been better attuned to what that was, but I was just too young and immature at that time. But it was, powerful enough that I remembered it. Yeah, so that's a wonderful place. Another thing I wanted to say about that was I read somewhere, I'll say it was Popular Mechanics, but some magazine like that, where they put a biplane up against a modern jet. And
Hmm.
because it didn't put off enough of a heat signature and it just had lift like crazy, it was able to do way better than everybody expected. I'm not going to say it won, but it's going so slow and so up
Yeah.
and that you couldn't deal with it. And I was like, that's funny to think about. And I don't know how a jet pilot would do that now, especially if that era's targeting really couldn't reliably see it. Like, that's a funny premise for a book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm having fun with it, so far, and um, yeah, I got the story idea because I delivered a F-18 to Davis Monthan, to the boneyard, and then a couple years later, I went back and I picked up the same jet and I brought it out of retirement. And so I was like, well, how often do we do that?
Oh,
And
yeah,
started thinking about bringing jets out of retirement, and
yeah,
and it's a completely fictional scenario. I don't think it would ever happen, but it's just a fun one to kind of investigate.
yeah,
And there's obviously a lot of dynamics, with the older generation that maybe is a little bit grittier, and then the
yeah.
newer, younger generation, a little, just the generational gap, I think, between fighter pilots, of 30 years ago versus today is probably pretty significant. And a lot of opportunity for conflict in that book. So I'm really enjoying it.
It's interesting. So yeah, I think about baseball and I write about baseball probably more than I write about military or thriller stuff. And we often put modern players in a time machine and send them back to Babe Ruth's time and everything. But when you realize the problems of that time, like if you were born in 1895, you had a 1 in 4 chance of making it to the age of 18.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, that guy may not even be alive. You couldn't reliably get from Jamaica and play in baseball. Like, it just
Oh, right.
wasn't possible, right? And so, like, we look at like batters today have access to so much data. Well, you had to do that with a hangover, with no video, no
Right.
antibiotics. So is there a version of that for modern day? I'm not saying that either era is better, but they're just completely different problem sets.
And that's one of the things that I'm kind of toying with in this book, is that, I toy with the idea that back in the day they didn't have all this advanced technology. There was no touch screen displays. That had all the information you needed at your fingertips. You actually had to work for it. So, for instance, the F-14 Tomcats radar, it had a dedicated radar intercept officer who knew how to operate that radar because it was cumbersome. It was difficult.
Right.
Uh, Compared to the Hornet or the Super Hornet today, where it can be done by one person. The pilot can actually operate the radar, then look at the F-35 and the Joint Strike Fighter and the things that it's capable of. And so there was a different skill set.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now you're looking at pilots and aircrew that are having to take massive amounts of data and filter it to provide this big picture. But I think, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you were putting a lot more effort into actually just getting the data. And so it was, I think, a little bit different in how you operated the airplane. And so, yeah, I'm just looking at it in that perspective and like, what would I do in this situation? Or what would I do in that situation? And yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and just the life support in general. I mean, you put someone in like a B-17, you're like, you're
Yeah.
gonna need a lot of fur.
Yeah.
You're gonna be
Yeah.
freezing to death. Now I'm not saying it's comfortable, but it's a whole lot more. I mean,
It's
if you,
it's a lot more comfortable than that.
it's
I'll
a
say
lot
it's a lot more comfortable than that.
even riding in the back of a C-130, which is, sitting on those strap seats for more
Hmm.
than an hour, it gets to be pretty bad. But then you realize, like, oh, it's actually pretty nice compared
Yeah.
to what other things can be. No, that's fantastic. So, okay, so are you still writing on your own series, mixing that in with what you're doing with Griffin and the Ryan series?
Yeah, so my Battleborn series was 4 books. Then that series is done, and
Hmm.
then I've got the Silent Horizon series that I'm
Right.
co-authoring with Chad Robichaux. That's a 3-book series. So book 2 comes out in May, and then I've got the Griffin, and then now that my first Clancy will come out next September, and then now this new AWE book with Blackstone. I don't know when. I'm not sure when that one will come out yet. So
Hmm.
that's kind of I'm just writing whatever I have, whatever opportunities I have. I think next year, assuming I'm lucky enough to continue with the Jack Ryan Jr. series, I'll have to write 2 books in that series next year, and then I'll probably do one of my own, or maybe a Griffin if the opportunity presents itself. So I'm staying busy. I'm staying
When,
busy.
yeah. So Jack Ryan Jr. was just in Guyana, South America, and we have a lot of modern action going on in Venezuela and the Caribbean.
Mhm.
So, how close to the pulse are you trying to get, or can you not worry too much? How do you manage that part of it so that you're relevant but not like late?
I'm not really worrying about modern conflicts and kind of
Mhm.
where the hotspots are in the world. What I'm really trying to do is capture a feeling.
Yeah,
And for me, like I said, the early Clancy books, right? There's all that technical stuff, but the
yeah,
feeling that I got from, let's say, let's say Patriot games, for instance, like
yeah,
the somebody's coming after Jack Ryan like on his home turf, right?
right.
Or the Hunt for October, it's very, very confined. And so I'm trying to capture some of these feelings that Clancy elicited. And so my first book in the series, it actually takes place in Guam or off the coast and primarily under the water. It's the title of its Pressure Depth, and I'm really trying to kind of capture some of that Cold War era feeling of
Nice.
undersea warfare. And I'm not going to give too much away,
Let's not
but
give too much away. Yeah.
yeah, but it was really fun one to write. And but I don't know where I'm gonna take them, but I'm not gonna worry about what's going on in the real world, because I know when people pick up a book, they don't want to read Fox News or CNN. They
Right.
want to enjoy a story. So that's what I want to deliver.
Well, the place where I'm sitting right now is owned by a guy who's from Guam, and so
Is
if
that
you've
right?
ever wanted, yeah, 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 I got a crazy Chamorro man sitting right
Yeah.
behind me here. So if you ever want to get any insight, and I'll tell you one thing I didn't realize about Guam. There's two things. One thing is they all say on Guam, not in, and then they boy, Liberation Day is a big, big deal to them. And
Yeah.
we as a nation have done a terrible disservice to our Guamanian brothers and sisters by just completely ignoring um, the very, very, very impactful thing of getting the Japanese out.
Yeah.
it's emotional for those guys. So
Yeah,
anyhow, so that's not necessarily relevant to what we're talking about here, but we lose sight of these things, and we can do better. What else do you want to cover before we wrap this thing up? And by the way, thank you very much for sliding the time. That was helpful to me. I was
of
driving north,
course.
everybody, and I was behind schedule. So
Yeah, of course. I mean, that that's. I think we've covered all the big stuff. I'm just I'm really excited to see. I just saw on Amazon today that that Direct Action was #1 new release in war books. So I'm really excited about it, and I just hope that people will dive back into the series. And please drop me a note, let me know how you liked it, leave a review. Those things really help. With Christmas coming up, it's a perfect opportunity to get something for your loved one.
yeah, and once again, everybody, here is the book. It's W.E.B. Griffin, Direct Action, with our friend Jack Stewart's name right there because he wrote the dang thing. I am so excited for you, man. It's thrilled. I want you to come back and talk about your next book that comes out, and then of course the Jack Ryan stuff. I'm going to be reading that. I've loved getting back into Clancy, through my pals.
Yeah,
This is so
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, it's more enjoyable when you know the people writing it too.
Yeah, and I'm so desperate for you all to do well and everything else. Let me just ask you one more question. Here's another thing I have. Because of how far you've come and the success you've had, when you look forward to like where you might be, what's impossible but yet possible for you? What's
What's
out there?
what's impossible?
Yeah, like what seems
Impossible.
impossible, but you're like, actually, that's possible. Like what might happen in your writing career
You
that would
know,
just blow you away?
I don't know. Um, so I'm in my office at home right now, and on one wall I've got like a bunch of F-18 stuff, and I've got all my fighter pilot stuff in here. And then on my
Yeah,
back wall I've got all these books that framed, that I published. And one of my friends, also an author, a Navy pilot, he told me he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to have all his stuff up in his house because he didn't want his kids to think that that was something that they had to measure themselves against. And
yeah,
I looked at it a different way. And the way I've always looked at it is I want my kids to walk in this room and say, my dad set a goal and he accomplished it, and anything is possible. And if he can do it, I can do it. And so, I'm going to say right now, there's nothing impossible other than maybe growing a full head of hair. But in the writing thing, all I really want to do is continue telling stories that connect with people, that entertain people. And I'd love to be able to do it for a full-time job. And I'm going to keep telling stories as long as I'm given that opportunity.
hell yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I kind of look at it the same way. Just all these wonderful things are the byproduct of me just focusing on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Thank you so much for coming on the show, everybody. Again, one more time, Direct Action on Amazon, #1 new release. Get it, get it. You guys like military thrillers? That's it. And if there's someone in your life who loves them, books make great gifts, and tis the giving season. I'll see you all. Gosh, tomorrow I think I might have one or two shows, and then Jack, I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, I'll see you next.